Hi, everybody. So last week we began our journey through the Old Testament. What we discussed in last week's video was, why do you guys believe who Jesus is? Since you are the online class, you do not get to do any of the projects that I do with the Sunday and Thursday night group. But what we did on Sunday was I had all of the students read the first creation story and then draw what Earth looked like. This is what Earth looked like if you drew it correctly. Let's hold it up. Earth was a beautiful little snow globe. Water was trapped around the outside. The Earth was flat, and inside of the snow globe were the planets and the sun and the Earth, and then down here was the water, and the Earth was held up by columns. After they drew this, I asked them, okay, so it got it wrong, correct? And they said, yeah, it got it wrong. And I was like, okay, well, why do we keep this story? Why do we keep the first creation story? The reason is, again, recapping, we see evidence of the Trinity. We're given a God of love, and we're given a God that creates using words, which is, if you read 1 John, the gospel, it says, in the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word was with God. So God's creating through the Word, which is Jesus Christ. The Word is also known as Jesus, and through the Holy Spirit, which means that everything in creation was made through love and is good, is deeply good. That is why we keep the first creation story. In the second creation story with Adam and Eve, I'm just going to lightly touch over this because this is something we didn't talk about. We did talk about how Adam and Eve were in the garden. God puts the tree of knowledge, and they are given the option to choose. Do you want to be with me, or do you want to eat from this tree? And they chose to eat from the tree because that's what authentic love is. If God said, you have no choice but to love me, if we weren't given the option, if we weren't given the choice, it would not be true love. If you were forced to love somebody, if I put somebody in front of you and said, you're marrying this person and you better deeply love them, odds are you're probably not going to. It has to be a choice. One of the other things I want to lightly touch on about the first creation, or not the first creation story, second creation story in Genesis with Adam and Eve, is every single creature, every single creation of God has a task. Every single creature of God. The trees are meant to behave in a certain way. The animals are meant to behave in a certain way. Even man and woman, we were given a certain way that we were supposed to behave. We have a niche that we fit into. We were created in the image and likeness of God, and we were given dominion, which means we are instructed to be caretakers of all of creation. And when we chose the tree, when we chose not God, something happened. We disintegrated ourselves into the plan of creation. And so what does that mean? I want you to imagine the traffic driving on the interstate. All of the cars are going a similar speed in the same direction. Now, imagine that one of those cars says, I'm not going to go this speed, and they slow way down, way down. What happens is the cars that are coming behind at a top speed, they could hit that car and cause a huge accident. Or let's imagine, for example, all of the cars traveling in one direction on the highway, and then somebody decides, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. Again, it causes chaos, it causes disorder. In the second creation story, that's what people did. We were given a task to be caretakers of the world, to fit in a certain spot, and we said, we don't want to fit here. We choose not to, and it caused disorder. So when we talk about original sin, that original sin, the teaching of it developed with Augustine about 500, am I off on my time? I believe it was about 500 years after Christ died. Don't quote me on the year, but anyway, original sin, it came from Augustine's understanding of the book of Genesis. Now, what the belief is that original sin was we no longer wanted to be ordered the way that God intended us to be ordered into nature. Now, moving from there, I want to talk about Noah. The very first covenant was with Adam. The very second covenant was with Noah. God has this beautiful stubbornness in the Old Testament where he keeps trying to take us back to him. He keeps trying to re-embrace us, and we keep screwing up. And it's very sweet. It's like this passionate love story where God's like, I'm coming for you, I'm coming for you. And we're like, take me. We're like, just kidding. I'll stay in my sinful little place. And it's kind of sweet and it's kind of sad. But anyway, Noah and the flood is another very, very confusing story. You need to understand this because as an adult, when, let's say that you're involved in the church as an adult and you have your own children and your kids don't want to go to church or they don't want to believe in God, and they ask you, why do we believe any of this stuff? Why do we buy into it? You can't say because grandma wants you to go and grandma told me to believe this and so I did. You have to understand where the faith comes from. Because the thing is, these stories don't make sense. If you do not understand them, they do not make sense. As we looked at that very first creation story, the earth doesn't look like what it describes. So if you don't understand the meaning of the stories, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss everything. If you don't understand the second creation story, how it's telling us about ourselves, if you look at it as just a science book, you're going to completely miss it. Again, you're going to miss everything. The whole point of these stories explaining who you are to God. So when we move on to Noah is an extremely confusing story because in that story, God kills everybody. God kills everybody. And as Christians, you look at this story and you're like, what the heck? Like, we start with this loving God who creates everything out of love, and then he kills everybody. What the heck is happening here? So here is how we understand how to read the Bible. Origen, who it's a person. I'm not talking about like the origin of something. I'm talking about the person Origen had written. He's one of the church fathers. He's one of the founding fathers of our church, the early church fathers. He says, you read the whole Bible from the lens of Christ. You read the whole Bible from what the book of Revelation says. The book of Revelation is the very last book of the Bible. And in that book, it talks about reading the scrolls. The scrolls is referring to this, okay? And the way that you are to read the scrolls according to the book of Revelation is through the Lamb. So you need to understand everything through Christ. So in the Garden of Eden that we talked about with Adam and Eve, it's like a temple. And then they get kicked out of the garden. And a cherubim, an angel, is guarding the east, which means you wouldn't understand this if you just took it literally. The angel is guarding the east because that's the way the temple doors always faced. The temple doors always faced east. So Adam and Eve are no longer in the church. Not the second creation story. I'm sorry, I keep fumbling all over my words. When we get to the story of Noah, the story of Noah, we know, is the 4th chapter of the Ballad of Gilgamesh altered. So again, we have a non-factual story that is telling us something because we know that it originated in Mesopotamia from a different culture and we borrowed it. So if it's not true, why do we keep it? This is why. The ark, so first, let me jump here. So Noah, in this story, we're told that Noah is the only person that had any interest in God, the only person that wanted God. Now hearken back to the creation story where people are made in the image of likeness of God. And what that means when we are saying that we are made in the image and likeness of God, we are meant to be God, like the image bearers of God for all of creation. Okay, that's what we were instructed to do. And we were like, man, we're just going to go all over the place. So here we have Noah. And what makes this story extra funny, and the reason people thought Noah was insane, because when God came to Noah and said, create an ark, put 2 of every animal on it. Noah, these stories originated in the desert. So people are like, why the heck would somebody, when there's no water around, be building a boat? So Noah was like extra crazy. Not just crazy because he was building an ark because God talked to him, but crazy because he was in the desert. Now, Noah is continuing on what we learned about ourselves in the beginning of Genesis. We are meant to be image bearers of God. We are made in the image and likeness of God. We are the image of God, and we're meant to take care of the world. So true to form, true to the original creation stories, Noah's continuing that. He takes care of the animals by taking 2 of every kind onto the boat so that they can reproduce, so that they will not die off. Additionally, This ark is another image of a temple. We had it in the Garden of Eden and we got kicked out. And here it is again. God saying, all right, now here's our floating temple. So when we look at what happened, the world was flooded. Everybody except for Noah's family and the animals were killed. When you read this, you're like, what the heck? Like, how can I love a God that would just kill everybody? It's not a factual story. The point of that story is you have a whole community that lives in sin, and water washes away the sin. What does that sound like to you? Water washing away the sin. It sounds like baptism. So we screw up, and God still continues to reach for us and gives us an opportunity to pull ourselves out. This is going to be your relationship with God forever. You're going to screw up, but God is always reaching for you because he always wants you. That is what you're meant to pull from this story of Noah. You don't have to worry about God killing off the entire population. You don't have to worry about those kind of things. The point of Noah is we were given another church, the floating ark. Man is taking back that role of being the image bearer and caretaker of all of nature by taking all those animals in. We have the temple, the floating church, and we're given this beginning metaphor of baptism that washes away sin. It is our opportunity to accept God, have our sins washed away, and accept his hand reaching down, trying to pull us back up. So that is our second video on the Old Testament. If you guys have questions, one of the big flaws that I know that I have is I start to talk about things and sometimes I think I've explained it well and I haven't. So if you guys have questions, please include those in your emails back to me. Otherwise, I will continue on with the Old Testament because it's very important to understand why we still have these stories if they aren't fact. If they're not scientific and if they're not fact-based, why the heck do we still have these stories? And why do we hold them so important to us as a community and to us as a church? Have a wonderful break. There will be a gap between now and your last video. We will be on break until January 6th will be the next time I release a video to you. Have a wonderful Christmas break. I just hope it's great. Anyway, bye.